My name is Linda Abraham, and I am the president of Accepted and the moderator for today's webinar. I want to welcome all of you to How to Get Accepted to Medical School with Low Stats, to be presented by Alicia McNeese-Namankar. Before we start, a few items that will help you get the most out of this webinar, and one that will help us improve future webinars. If you have not downloaded your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so and print it out. I'm going to send you a link to it if you haven't done so yet. Here is the link for the webinar worksheet. My personal recommendation, again, is that you actually print it out, you use it to follow along, and also to take notes. Okay. Now, Alicia may ask questions during the presentation, or I might at some point, and ask you to raise your hand in response. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon on your control panel. Some of you used it to tell me that my voice was too low. So again, that's another way you can use it. If you are attending this webinar, right now we're going to test it. If you are attending this webinar because you want to become a physician, please raise your hand. Okay, well, you all seem to be here for the right reasons. Great. Okay. Now, we use the question window for your questions. If at any time during Alicia's presentation you have a question, please type it into the question window. Okay, thanks. We may also ask open-ended questions at different points in time in the presentation. To respond to an open-ended question, please type your answers in the chat window. So the question window is for your questions, the chat window is for your answers. When you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. We value your feedback, and I review all the responses and use those responses to change and hopefully improve these webinars. So again, please do that when you leave. Finally, I'm thrilled to introduce Alicia McNeese-Namankar, who will present How to Get into Medical School with Low Stats today. Alicia started advising Accepted's clients in 2012. She immediately was earning rave reviews from her clients and has been earning them ever since. Prior to joining Accepted, she both evaluated applications and advised med school applicants as director of the UC Davis post-bac program. She also wrote a book on post-bac program admissions. She brings enormous insight and experience with the medical school application process to our webinar today. Without further ado, Alicia McNeese-Namankar, and get accepted to medical school with low stats. Now, actually,
thank you for.
were we going to have a couple of polls before?
Yeah, we had 3 questions.
Okay, you want to go for it, or should I do that?
You're welcome to do it.
Okay. Well, first of all, for applicants, in the chat window, where are you located? City and state in the United States, city and country outside the United States. That's in the chat window, please. California, close by. Kansas, Northern California, Steve Point, Wisconsin, Cincinnati, Ohio, Silver Spring, Maryland. My daughter lives there. San Francisco, California, San Jose, Boston, Montgomery Village, Maryland, Washington State, all over the country. Okinawa, Japan. Whoa. Okay, military dependent. Welcome. What time is it there?
Cool.
Yeah, Amherst. That's near you. Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona. Okay. All right. All over the country and Okinawa, Japan. Fantastic. Okay. And then the second poll was, are you let's launch this poll, first-time applicant or reapplicant? Okay, so see, people are still voting. Again, are you a first-time applicant or a reapplicant? We're at 76% having voted. Can we get it up to 80? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the polling and share the results. So 84% of you are first-time applicants and 16% are reapplicants. Okay, so a fairly small percentage of reapplicants.
Interesting.
And then the second poll is, what is concerning you the most? Your GPA, your MCAT, or both? Okay, got good response on this one. Again, the question is, which one of your scores, GPA or MCAT, makes you worry the most? MCAT, GPA, or both? And with 81% having voted, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm going to end the poll and share the results with you. 17% is the MCAT, 34% it's GPA, and 49% it's both.
Wow. Okay, good. Okay.
Right?
Excellent. So this is going to be a very helpful presentation then.
Okay, and now, really, really and truly, without further ado, Alicia McNeese-Namankar, who's going to present Get Accepted to Medical School, Low Stats.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. So there are two reasons why applying with low scores can hurt us. So the first is that the MCAT is being used to assess how well a student will perform in their first year of medical school, and it's also been correlated with how well a student will do on the USMLE Step 1 and Step 2. And this is according to current research in medical education. Second, while GPA is a less predictable indicator of academic ability, since every campus has so much variability in how challenging their coursework may be, it is still used to determine how strong a student's commitment is to completing their long-term academic goals. So what is a low MCAT score? You may be asking yourself. According to the 2019 AAMC Orange Sheet for the 2019 application cycle, matriculants had an MCAT range from 483 minimum to 512 average. And you may be sitting there shocked, right? A 483, right? As you can see, this number really is probably a lot lower than you would think it would be. But it is possible, right, to get accepted with a low score. So applying with an MCAT score below a 500, in my opinion, is what would be considered low. And you can apply with a low score if you're strategic, right, and if you have a higher GPA to compensate, but also if you're open to applying to osteopathic programs. So as we'll discuss later, osteopathic programs are much more likely to accept students with lower scores, especially on the MCAT. So what can you do about it if you have a low MCAT score below 500? The first thing is to think about whether you'd be willing to retake the MCATs if you have the time, the energy, the money. In over 14 years, the one thing that all students I've spoken with who have a perfect or near perfect score in the MCAT, the one thing they all have in common is they stopped everything else and just studied for the MCAT. And so for most people, that was on average 2 to 3 months of prep. So if you can, and obviously the pandemic presents the ideal situation for studying for the MCAT, right, because you pretty much can't do anything else at this point. So use your practice exam scores to decide whether to take the exam or not. So I recommend having an Excel spreadsheet and very closely tracking your progress in each section and to reevaluate your strategy to see how you can improve it. Make sure that you have an increasing trend in your scores. A decreasing trend can actually hurt your application if you have a decreasing trend in your MCAT scores. And I did have one student get accepted a couple years ago with an MCAT score 1 point lower to an osteopathic medical school. So it is possible to get accepted with a decreasing trend, but it can't be a very big decreasing trend, and it'd be more likely to happen at an osteopathic school. I recommend compensating with a higher GPA. So if you have a higher GPA, then you're all set, right? That's going to make a huge difference. And you'll want to explain in your personal statements and or secondary essays the obstacles you encountered in preparing for the MCAT. So no excuses, right? No whining, no complaining, just share the facts. So the lowest MCAT score that I helped someone get accepted into medical school with last cycle was a 498 for an osteopathic medical school and a 503 to an allopathic medical school. So what is a low GPA? According to the AAMC Orange Sheet for the 2019 cycle, applicants applied to MCAT with an average of a 3.59 GPA, and matriculants had an average of a 3.73. So don't be discouraged by these numbers. Please don't get discouraged because they do not share the full range of scores for students accepted. So don't let these numbers discourage you. So applying with a score below a 3.0 is considered low, in my opinion. So what can you do about it? You can complete informal post-bac coursework. And this would mean that you apply to take classes at the local community college or for your institution, and now everything's pretty much online, so it's easier than ever to take additional coursework if you want to do that. And that would be taking undergraduate level, upper division bio-sci coursework specifically to improve your undergraduate GPA, cumulative in science. You could also consider applying to formal post-bac programs. That's an option if your GPA is within a competitive range. You could consider completing a master's or an SMP or other graduate program. However, I want to point out that this would be considered graduate coursework, and on the MCAT application, that would not improve your undergraduate GPA. However, if you apply to osteopathic medical schools, they do have all of your coursework taken, undergraduate and graduate level. It all calculates into one cumulative GPA. So that graduate GPA would actually improve your overall GPA on the DO application. And the lowest GPA and science GPA that I have helped someone get it accepted with last cycle was a cumulative GPA of a 3.0 to an MD, and it was to an excellent, excellent school, and a science GPA of a 2.8, and that was students got accepted both to MD and DO, who I assisted with a 2.8 science GPA. So when applying with those scores, it is especially important to focus on the following sections of your application to make them as strong as possible. The personal statement, right? This is the place where you get to explain any difficulties, any challenges that you've overcome, the activities section essays, and the statement of disadvantage if that applies to you. So the best personal statements address any questions that the selection committee may have about you as a student, right? They anticipate those questions. So you want to focus on your strengths and address or discuss any weaknesses and describe how you've improved. For the activity section, for those of you listening, why do you think the activity section is so important when applying with low numbers?
In the chat window, please. Because it shows your experience and your commitment to the profession. Deepti. This is from Deepti. Anybody else? It shows you are a well-rounded person. Shows your character. Give some context if your activities took up a lot of time. Srija. Shamia says you could explain why you struggled in classes, multitasking, and carrying many roles. Zach says it displays your flexibility for different roles. Farida says it shows how busy you are, your commitment. Moises says gives them more information to know you. Shows you can relate to different people, says James. Makes up for lack of uploading of a CV, says Deepti. Not sure about that one, but okay.
Yeah, no, these are all right on. And the one thing, the trend that I'm seeing that's really interesting, and I don't know if you've seen this as well, Linda, but I've noticed either students have a 4.0 and like hardly any activities at all, or they have a really low GPA and like incredible activities. They've done so many things. Have you noticed that?
I've seen it. I mean, there still are only 24 hours in a day.
Yeah, true. It really feels like people either have to sacrifice, right, their grades or their activities. But it's possible, like every once in a while I come across a student who's got that balance.
Yes.
So if you have time and you're starting early, right, think about how you can create that balance, because it will make you a truly unique applicant to have, right, an impressive amount of activities with a strong GPA.
Also shows excellent time management skills.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, so I agree with everything that you've shared. It's important to include the details, I would say, of how committed you were to working in the community, if that has been important to you, and hopefully it has. If you overcommitted yourself through your community service, which often happens, it's important to highlight the strengths and the number of activities in your application and your dedication to service, as well as to demonstrate what you learned from it and how you've improved your time management skills. Right, so as long as there's an increasing trend in your test scores, right, and your MCAT scores, right, that's fantastic. Medical schools love when students show evidence of resilience. If you were evaluating applications at a medical school, what would you look for in the application of someone with numbers that might be lower than their average?
In the chat window, rather. Upward trend, says Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you'd look for? Dedication to community, says Michelle. Clinical experience. Commitment to an activity. A genuine passion. This is from Shrija. I apologize if I mispronounce any names here, by the way. Nashat says commitment to medicine. And James says leadership. Morella says consistent work and volunteer activities. And Deepti says, what if you don't have room to include talents, hobbies, and activities section? Why don't you put that in the question? We'll get to it later. Okay, Deepti? Okay.
Yeah, these are accurate, absolutely. An upward trend makes all the difference. And in fact, medical schools actually love to see this evidence of resilience because it's very important, right, that they see what you do when you are faced with, right, when you struggle. They like to see what's the pattern, how does this person handle challenge? And that's an important question to ask and to answer because medical schools have learned, right, there's students with perfect grades who get accepted into medical school. But when I was at Davis, we had a student with a 4.0 GPA, amazing numbers, almost a perfect MCAT score, and he ended up threatening staff and students. It was the first time in his life that he'd ever struggled, and it was awful to, to see what happened. He was asked to leave. The cohort of students, his class, was very stressed out by the situation, and stuff like that hurts the reputation of the school. So what schools learn from experiences like that is that if they select students who show evidence of resilience, they're much more likely to end up with students who can handle the challenges of medical school because it's intense, right? So it will not hurt you if you've struggled in the past. It may actually help your application as long as you've recovered. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the statement of disadvantage. This is often a challenging section to complete, but it will only help explain why you may have struggled academically or why you were not able to focus on studying only on the MCAT if you could not afford a test prep program or take time off work to study. Will anybody be completing this section? Can you give us a show of hands?
Raise your hands if you're going to be completing this. About almost 20%. Yeah, just under 20%.
Wow, okay, awesome. So if you're not sure whether you should apply as disadvantaged, I'm going to define that for you. So you can apply as a disadvantaged applicant if you've experienced any form of social, economic, or educational disadvantage at any time in your life. And I'll give you examples for each one. For social disadvantage, that could be growing up in a single-parent household, being treated differently due to ethnicity, language, religion, sexuality, and any other reason. Economic disadvantage would be if you lived on food stamps, if your family lived in Section 8 housing, if you qualified for any family, federal aid programs. Educational disadvantage would be if you have a learning disability or if you attended low-performing public schools that could not provide textbooks or basic materials to all students. So the strategy that I recommend for completing the statement of disadvantage is really just to state the facts. But there's no need to tell a story here. There's no need to exaggerate anything or give your opinion. It's more about stating the facts. If your family relied on food stamps and if you had a parent who was incarcerated, if you ended up growing up in a single-parent household, you really want to lay out the information so they can understand what the situation was. And there's no need to replicate any other part of the application, with this section. You don't want to copy paste this essay or put parts of it anywhere else. So the statement of disadvantage should stand on its own. And you shouldn't, I don't recommend including like any part of it in your personal statement. They should complement each other, right? But you don't want to cut and paste anything. So for school selection is incredibly important if you're applying with low scores. This section is, can make or break your application, right? Deciding where to apply it is huge. So how many schools, for those of you listening, are you planning on applying to?
In the chat window, please. 20 from Rachel. Amy
Excellent.
says 20. 10 says Marilla. 8 says Ali, I think. 20, 8 to 10, 28 from Boris, 8 from Zach, 5 MD, 8 DO, 29, 30, 15, 15, 35, 8, 40. Might be a little much. 17, 15, 25. 20-ish, but don't have my MCAT scores yet. Got rescheduled by COVID. 32 says Getard. 20 for me. 24. So there you have it. We have a great group today. Very active.
Yeah, thank you for participating. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say anywhere from 20 to 25 is a safe number. So 8 to 10, if you guys can, increase that number, right? The more schools you apply to, the better off, and you're more likely to get accepted to the schools in which you're a resident of the state. So make sure you're applying to all the medical schools in your state first. And the next thing would be to make sure, right, that your numbers are close to at least the 25th percentile. So as long as your MCAT or your cumulative or science GPA fits into their 25th percentile, right, you can apply to that school. Okay, so if applicable, you can apply for the FAP, the Fee Assistance Program. So the FAP allows you to take the MCAT for a reduced fee. It allows you to apply to a certain number of schools, and the application fee is waived for both the primary and the secondaries. And last year that was 16 schools, and I'm sure they've increased it this year. You want to evaluate your stats and make sure you compare them to the medical schools you'd like to attend. And it's okay if both your numbers, your MCAT and your GPA, don't fit into the 25th percentile. That's okay, right? That'll be more of a reach school. A safety school would be a school where both of your numbers fit within their 25th percentile or their median. That would be a safety school. And a dream school would be, any schools where your numbers don't fit any of their ranges. And I understand, right, some people want to apply to dream schools. It's good to dream. It's important to dream. So, have some dream schools, but make sure that the majority of your list, right, is not made up of dream schools, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay to have, I would say 3 dream schools is a great number, right? And then, I would say it depends on what your numbers are, what that distribution is going to look like. But, reach schools, a little bit less of those, but the majority, the vast majority, right, 10 to 15 of your schools should be safety schools, right? Puts you in the best possible position. So the allopathic MD numbers, the averages for this past cycle, so for MCAS for 2019, for applicants, the average MCAT was a 506.1. The cumulative average GPA was a 3.58, and the average science GPA was a 3.48. So for matriculants, for students accepted, the average MCAT was a 511.5, and the average for the cumulative was a 3.73, and the average science was a 3.66. So you can see how much higher the students accepted were than from applicants. So looking at the osteopathic numbers, the MCATs were much, much lower for osteopathic medical schools. And the cumulative and science GPAs are just slightly lower, but the MCAT is significantly lower for osteopathic medical schools. So for all applicants, the average MCAT for DO schools, and this is for the ACOMAS 2018 cycle, that's the most current data available on their website. The average MCAT is a 501.96. The average cumulative GPA is a 3.43. and the average science GPA is a 3.3 for applicants. For matriculants, for students accepted, that MCAT is a 503.83. And so you can see that's significantly less, right, than the 511.5 for MCAS. The average cumulative GPA for students accepted to DO school is a 3.54, and the average science GPA is a 3.43. Right, so it's quite a bit lower for the science than MCAS. Okay, so moving on, to choose medical schools, it's a good idea to network with other students to learn more about the culture at the school, with medical students especially if you can, and medical school outreach officers, and that would be done like via social media. So you want to make sure that you're following any medical schools of your interest, and that you're paying attention to any events or virtual events that they're hosting. You can visit medical school campuses virtually. Hopefully their websites now have those options. You can research schools that specialize in your research interests or fields of interest. And that's a good thing to do. Like if you're working in research in a particular area, look at what medical schools are doing exciting things in that area of your interest, right? You might be surprised. You might be really excited to see, how you can continue what you're already doing and build on it. Applying early is absolutely critical. So the timeline, if you're applying with lower numbers, right, it's really about strategy. So applying early can make all the difference. If you apply late, say you submit in September, right, medical schools may not even get the chance to look at your application because they've already offered, right, the secondaries and all the interviews they have available. And so if they've accepted their class already, right, and by the time you submit your application, they just might not even look at it. So medical school is on a rolling admissions basis. That's what that means. So make sure if you're applying with those scores that you get your application in as early as possible, especially this cycle. And we will answer questions after Linda's presentation.
Okay. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your participation. First, I want to start by asking you a question. In the chat window, please, your answer. What was the most valuable piece of advice, information, or insight that you got from Alicia's excellent presentation? GPA MCAT balance. Okay, great. How to write the disadvantage statement. Great. All of its strategy is clear, key. Wonderful. You still have a chance. That's right. I'm so glad you got that, Rachel. Disadvantage statement, the number of schools. Apply to schools where your stats are at least at the 25th percentile level. Great. Acceptable osteopathic school stats were eye-opening. The number of schools, disadvantage statement, never heard of it. Whoa, really good. Apply early, disadvantage statement, apply early. Apply early. That was a good one, Alicia. Full-time study for MCAT is ideal. Don't be afraid to apply to your dream school, as long as you also apply to other schools where you are competitive. Don't forget that part of it. How many schools to apply to and where. Highlighting resilience. Not taking the MCAT yet, don't know much, but seeing the MCAT stats was very helpful. Literally everything, the best I've heard from any presentation. Go, Alicia.
Yay!
I have more confidence in applying now hearing these stats. Thank you so much. Okay, this is great feedback. Thank you so much, everybody. Alicia has given you the what of applying to medical school with low stats, but not exactly the how. And that's really impossible for her or me to give with any depth and specificity in a webinar for the many, a webinar that has to be general. But you are an individual applying to medical school. Each of you, every single one of you, has unique talents and perhaps a weakness or two. You don't want to let a mistake or blemish prevent you from pursuing the career of your dreams. Your goal, apply confidently and successfully to the best program for you. Whoops. The medical school application process is grueling and the stakes are high. AAMC in 2018-19 processed 849,678 applications from 52,777 applicants. 21,622 matriculated. and that's an acceptance rate of just under 41%. The ACOMAS numbers for DO doctors are similar with a slightly lower acceptance rate, or matriculation rate, I should say. Given the complexity of the application process and the high stakes, you need an expert guide who knows the process inside and out and who can support you through this grueling journey. You need Accepted to be your guide. We can give you a customized approach that fits your needs. We're not one size fits all. You get options so that if you only need a little help and on one element of the application, that's what you can get. If you're starting from scratch and you want comprehensive assistance, that's what you get. You get one dedicated advisor like Alicia, who becomes expert in your story and helping you present it. You get candor and objectivity combined with decades of experience in med admissions. Now, Accepted has guides like Alicia who can advise and mentor you as you choose where to apply, how to mitigate those weaknesses, how to highlight your strengths, show fit, demonstrate that you will be a contributor, and ultimately gain acceptance. Here's what you should do. Visit accepted.com/medical/services, choose a service that's right for you, get the guidance you need for that missing how, and go from confusion to clarity, from doubts to confidence. Some of you may say, isn't Accepted expensive? Well, you know what? So is rejection. And it can be much more rejection, more expensive rather. Our fees are clear, but the cost of rejection is not quite as obvious. So let's take a look at the risk of not applying with Accepted's help. Cost of reapplication can easily be several $1,000s if you don't qualify for the FAP, and even with the FAP, it can climb. A year of earnings at a much lower level than after you earn your MD or DO degree. And there's the potential that you could have gotten into a better program, however you define that, with greater lifetime opportunities and potentially even earnings. Now, every year we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided, after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected, that they would work with us a second time around. That's fine with us. We're happy to work with you whenever you come to us. But they would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. Our own survey of clients shows that our clients enjoy an 80% acceptance rate to MD and DO programs. But enough from me. What do Accepted's clients say? I do apologize for lag in my response. It's evidence that I am very busy because I am a med student. I was offered 4 interviews total and was accepted to 2 schools. I chose to attend UCF College of Medicine, Orlando. I'm eternally grateful to you, Alicia, for all the critical advice and help you gave. I could not have made it through the application process without your help. Thank you for your patience and for truly caring about my success. Now, Alicia is fantastic, and we'll hear from another client of hers a little later, but she books up. I want you to realize that we have other talented, experienced, and knowledgeable consultants too. So here's a couple more, and there are hundreds on the site. And I'm going to just read excerpts from it. Hello, Sydney. I can't believe how well you managed to cut my essay in half without compromising my tone or eliminating the little stories. There are 17 more hours left till the application is due, and I'm not stressed at all because I know I have you by my side with this essay. Or this one. Herman is all around brilliant. His ideas and input transformed my essays. I have no doubt that his help has made a huge difference in the quality of my applications. I will recommend Herman to anyone and everyone. So once again, this is what I recommend you do as follow-up to today's webinar. Visit accepted.com/medical/services, choose a service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, and apply confidently and effectively. And now for your questions. Okay, you have some very good ones here. Again, we have a wonderful audience. Okay.
This is my favorite part.
Okay. So Deb asks, if part of our low starts profile is because we already have a previous lackluster MCAT score, do you suggest we wait to add schools onto our application until after we take the MCAT again, or just make sure we list on our application our intended test date?
Oh, okay. That's a tough one. Because a couple of things. So there's nothing like having your score in your hand, right? Knowing exactly what you've got, because that should, right, guide your school selection, right? That number is really important to helping you choose schools, and that will indicate to you whether you're whether schools are safety or reach schools for you. If it were me, if it was my second time applying, right, this is the person's second time applying, it depends on when you're scheduled to take the MCAT. That being said, this year's a little bit different because of the pandemic. Schools will be accepting scores right later than they ever have in the past. So there's a few different things going on. So you're a second-time applicant.
Actually, she said she doesn't say she's a reapplicant. She says she's taken a previous MCAT, so it's not clear.
Oh, previous MCAT, not a previous
Right.
application.
Right, right.
Okay, oh, great. Okay, that's different. If you're a first-time applicant, I would say go for it because the pandemic does present unique challenges, and they keep, canceling MCAT dates. Schools are going to be more flexible in accepting those, MCAT scores much later than usual. So if you're a first-time applicant, I would say go for it because this is a very different year than ever in the past. If you're a reapplicant, it might be worth waiting to have that score depending on when you're planning on taking the MCAT and when you'll actually get your results back.
Okay, great. Here is another question. Now, I tell you what, I'm going to do something we've been experimenting with. If it's okay with you, I'm going to let at least those of you who unmute yourselves ask your questions yourself, okay? So, Deepti, you asked a question about not having enough room to, let's see, there we go. If you want, you can ask your question, okay?
Oh, hi. So my question was if you don't have, I've read that it's nice to see that people have other interests besides healthcare and volunteering and things outside of what they think admissions committees look for. So my question is, what if you don't have room to include these talents or hobbies because you think maybe your other volunteering and clinical work is a bit more important?
You know what? That would actually not be a problem.
That's a good problem to
because,
have.
Yeah, it's a fantastic problem to have. That actually isn't a problem in my opinion because you will actually get secondary questions that ask, is there something in your primary that you haven't shared with us? Almost, like the majority of medical schools in their secondary have some kind of question like that. Or what have you been doing since you submitted the primary? Or is there something else, you would like to tell us about yourself? So actually, I have some students do that as a strategy. They'll leave out something that's very important to them to talk about in their secondaries.
Great, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see, we have, this is from an anonymous attendee. Is there a place on secondaries where I can state my spring quarter grades since they weren't received in time for my primaries?
Yeah, so you can send an updated transcript, or if if your application has been processed, then what you can do is you can actually send updates to the schools that accept them with those grades.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. Shariah, I'm going to try and unmute you. If you don't want to be unmuted, just keep yourself muted and then I'll speak your question. Okay? Go ahead. Oh, okay, then I'll ask her a question. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so my question is, would it be frowned upon to separate certain activities that, for example, you see your club and you had a leadership position, but then you want to take out a specific activity like Habitats for Humanity and list that individually? Is that acceptable?
I missed the first part of your question. Do you mind repeating it? It was kind of muffled. I had trouble hearing it.
Sure. So I'm just wondering to separate certain things in your activities. For example, you might list your club and the leadership position that you had, but then could you also take out a specific activity that you guys did, like Habitats for Humanity, and list that independently?
I see what you're saying. It depends on how intensive the activity was. Like if you dedicated a certain number of hours every week to Habitat for Humanities, that could be its own activity. But if you only did a few things or it was just a couple day events, I wouldn't include it separately. So it depends on the intensity of it.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. It's from an anonymous attendee. If you've recently been diagnosed with depression or anxiety, is that a negative? Could help explain low scores, but also is that going to make me look bad?
Well, join the club. All right. These are very, very challenging times, and it's absolutely normal, right, to be feeling depressed or anxious. So you are not alone, right? All of us are experiencing some levels of those things because our lives have changed so drastically overnight. But I would say, it's nobody else's business. So I wouldn't recommend including it in the application. I think, unfortunately, sharing mental health issues are still very taboo in some ways, like especially bipolar condition. Like there are just some things I don't recommend students share. And especially like chronic conditions or things that are ongoing or that require management, because it's really nobody else's business. And it's totally at this point normal, right? Everybody's going through some level of depression or anxiety with everything happening. But my heart goes out to you, and you're not alone. You're definitely not alone.
Okay, great. Thank you. This one is from Moises. I'm going to unmute. No, he's actually, I think he left, so we're not going to take this question. Okay. This is from Dara. My MCAT isn't scheduled until August 1. Should I submit my application to medical schools now to get it in early and have school just wait for my score? Or should I wait until after I get my score back mid-August to submit my applications to all the schools I want to apply to? This is similar to the question you
Yeah,
answered
and we don't
initially.
know if she's a first or second time applicant, do we?
No. Dara, do you want to tell us?
Okay.
If you're a first or second time applicant? Just in the chat window? Yes, you're a first-time applicant, or yes, you're a reapplicant. I'm a little confused. Reapplicant. She's a reapplicant. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, there are a couple of things I want to mention about that then. That is, so if you're scheduled to take it August 1st, you're not going to get the score for 2 weeks later. And that would be very late to submit, like too late. So I would, because you're in a time crunch, I would base your decision on your practice exam scores, right? I would create an Excel spreadsheet, make sure you're tracking very closely your individual scores. And if they're not going in the right direction, or you feel like it's not going well, right, you might not end up taking the exam. So submitting, puts you in a situation if you're not sure whether you're going to take it, or if you're on the other hand, if your scores are looking really good, if your practice exam scores are moving in the right direction, you're feeling really confident, you feel really good about it, then I would say submit, based on your practice exam scores. The thing I want to say about applying as a reapplicant is, Harvard Medical School only accepts applications from first and second time applicants now. And the only reason I mention that is because it gives us a clue as to how medical schools look at reapplicants. So in my experience, I've seen students get accepted the first, second, and third times they've applied, and I've helped people do it year after year. I've been doing this for over 14 years now. But students who apply a fourth time, I personally have never seen somebody get accepted a fourth time they've applied to medical school. I've heard rumors, I've heard stories about it, but I've never seen it myself. So that gives you an idea of, you want to be very judicious when you're applying as a reapplicant, because the first, second time are your best chances. The third time, right, it's only one click for schools that you've applied to pull up your previous application. And so if nothing changes from that first, second, to third application, right, that's a reason for rejection. And when I was at UC Davis School of Medicine as director of the postbac program there for almost 6 years, it was incredible. We had this one gentleman who applied every single year I was there. And I think it was like his 17th time by the time I left. And he just kept applying like every single year, and he didn't change anything on his application. And it was just kind of wild. But that's how medical schools feel about reapplicants, right? So if you're applying a second time, right, you should hopefully have changed as much as humanly possible. But I would say that's a gamble because August is late. It's really not a great idea to apply in August. I haven't seen very many people get accepted.
Alicia, do you think that because of COVID, the whole time cycle is going to be shifted a little bit later this year?
That's such an interesting question because my advice to students this cycle has been to apply as early as possible.
Oh, I think that advice still holds.
Yeah, it still holds, yeah.
But I mean, there are a lot of applicants who just can't take the test.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Those applications are going to be postponed.
It's a gamble. It's a gamble. That's the thing is not having your MCAT score is like, it's a wild card. You don't know what it's going to be. And then if you decide to submit your application late, that adds an additional level of, potentially putting your application in a bad position. So if it were me, I do some soul searching. Really look at your practice test scores, see how they're going. If you feel confident, submit your application as soon as you can. But the thing is rolling admissions. So medical schools are going to stop looking at applications. They literally, I'm telling you, like they're having to read thousands of applications. And the average medical school gets like 7,000 applications nowadays, and they have maybe 100 spots. So as soon as they've offered all their secondaries and all their interview spots, they stop reading applications, right? The only students I've seen get accepted late, like August, is students applying as disadvantaged in the past. But you're right, Linda, this is a very different year.
Yeah.
So as long as if the person's willing to take that risk, if you feel comfortable, go for it. But it's definitely going to be a gamble.
Okay. I think there's so much unusual about this cycle.
Yeah.
I mean, in previous cycles, I would completely have agreed with your timeline. In this cycle, I think it just has to trend a little later. I also think because everybody else is going to be trending later, I think those people who do get an application in early, a competitive qualified application, are going to have that much more of an advantage.
Yeah, I think it's really going to put the people who applied early in a better position this cycle because I do think probably a lot of people are holding off.
Right.
Yeah. You're probably right.
All right. So we have a question here from anonymous attendee. Would having to work while studying for MCAT, taking courses because you needed health insurance, be considered a disadvantage? I have never been on food stamps, etc., but this is something I couldn't avoid.
I missed the first part. Could you say just the first part again?
Would having to work while studying for MCAT and taking courses because you needed health insurance be considered a disadvantage? I have never been on food stamps, etc., but this is something I couldn't avoid.
No, so that by itself wouldn't be enough to apply as disadvantaged. So it would have to be some kind of financial hardship. So for example, if your income was below the poverty level, if your family's income was below the poverty limit, then it would be appropriate to apply as disadvantaged. But if it was just a hardship to work to cover health insurance, that by itself, that one thing wouldn't be enough.
Okay, thank you. So Nadia has a question. I'm going to unmute you if you want to be unmuted. If not, I will ask your question.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good.
So my question was, I plan on taking the MCAT the fall of 2021. I'm involved in a lot of things on campus. I started a part of my personal statement, but I was wondering when would be the best time to seek the team accepted help and consultation if I don't plan on taking my MCAT until the fall of 2021, and also I won't be graduating until the fall of 2021.
You're my favorite kind of applicant. So people who start early, you're really setting yourself up for success.
Agreed.
It's incredible. Like I think the students I work with who start a year before they're applying, my acceptance rate is probably closer to like 98%. Because when you start early like that, it's just fantastic because you get to build the best possible application, right? You give time to take on new activities that are strategic. You have time to really put together the most gorgeous essays and an application that you're going to be excited to submit. But to answer your question, So usually students start working with me in the fall of the year that they're planning on applying that spring. So I recommend, it's a good goal to get your primary finished before winter break, and then we could start outlining your secondaries and make sure everything's ready to go, that you have all the secondaries for your top choice schools finished before you even submit the primary. And that puts you in the best possible position, right? Because you're going to be cool as a cucumber, right? Enjoying the application process. You'll have everything done early. But yeah, I would say it'd be good to get started in the fall.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're
Yeah,
very
yeah.
welcome. Thank you for the question. Okay. Let's see. We have a question here. So Ciara writes that MCAT sent an email today saying that all test scores for this cycle will be expedited. Due to COVID-19, we are all receiving our scores within 2 weeks, which is great. ACOMAS hasn't really changed anything. I received 2 invites for secondaries today for DO schools. One school noted that they are interviewing students without their MCAT scores. Students just have to take it before they are admitted. And yeah.
Wow, huh?
Yeah, so that's a new one.
Yeah.
Nashat, we have another student who's in the same position as Nadia and planning ahead. That's great. We love that. Okay. Here's an anonymous question. How early do you recommend to apply?
How early? I mean, this cycle, I recommended students get the application in, you know, as soon as it opened. But it depends on your situation. It depends on what's going on in your life. And, you know, I had a couple students wait to submit the application because they needed a little bit more experience in some new activities. So that they could write about those in the primary so that they had a maximum number of 15. So it'll depend on your specific situation, right? I would need a little bit more information to answer that question, but usually like the sooner the better.
Okay. Some of the applicants, several of them are asking what's early. Again, we can talk about early in terms of all cycles, but this one, I think through this cycle, I don't know, you can take the question. It's a little bit harder.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, this year is so different from any other year. And I think medical schools are just going to have to be so much more forgiving and flexible. So I think possibly like this is really going to give applicants the advantage, right?
Right.
Like if you get to interview before they even have your MCAT score, you know, if they absolutely think you're fantastic and they're willing to accept someone with a lower score, I mean, I sort of am anticipating, I'll be curious to hear what you think, Linda, but I'm anticipating that the scores will be slightly lower for this cycle.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I am also, yes.
Because the stress, I mean, my heart goes out to students who have had their MCAT dates canceled multiple times, and
Yeah.
you guys are amazing in staying focused, and despite all this incredible pressure and having to reschedule your test dates, and it's not easy to reschedule. I mean, I heard the website has been pretty difficult to use, so, you know, the students have had to wait. There's been long wait times, and so the fact that you're able to complete the process is all that much more impressive.
Okay, I agree. I agree 100%. Alina asks, how do you explain a bad semester on an application?
It all depends on what happened. I mean, that's a juicy question because,
Yeah.
right? There's so many ways to approach it. There's not just one way. And pretty much, you know, you can cover it from so many different angles. So I would really have to know a lot more details to be able to give you a specific recommendation.
Right. Yeah. One thing I think I'm going to let you go with that answer. I'm not going to try and answer because we just don't have enough information. Okay,
Yeah.
All right. Courtney, let me, if you don't want to, I'm going to allow you to talk. If you don't want to ask your question, you can just stay muted, but you're unmuted, so you can ask your question.
Hello. Thank you for
Hi.
taking my question.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So I'm currently stationed overseas. My husband is active duty. And because I'm not active duty, it is almost impossible for me to shadow a doctor or even research just because I'm overseas. However, I am able to volunteer for the Red Cross, being a caseworker and part of the disaster action team. Will that play any favor on my application, or will that kind of hurt me because I haven't worked side by side with the doctor shadowing him or her?
No, so medical schools love applicants who have hands-on experience. So that's fantastic. It sounds like you've gotten really good experience. Any military applicant I've worked with in the past has gotten accepted. So I haven't had any issues with anybody who's active duty military getting into medical school. It's only going to help you. You know, thank you for your service to our country, and it's amazing what you're doing, and medical schools so appreciate that as well.
Oh, thank you. May I ask one more question? I did have
Sure.
one more.
That's okay with me, yeah.
Sure, go
That's
ahead.
fine with me.
Thank you. I'm also, any advice for a non-traditional student? I'm going to probably be twice the age as the other students if I get accepted. So any advice for my application being an older student?
Yeah, so the cool news I have for you is for the 2019 cycle, the oldest person accepted was 53.
Okay, I'm younger than them though.
So
You're
you're
feeling
fine.
younger all the time, right?
No, I feel young.
You're fine. Yeah, like you're good. No, non-traditional applicants are the best because you have life experience, right? You have so much to share with your classmates, so that's only going to help you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
I'm
I
also,
appreciate
Courtney,
it.
just one
Yeah.
little thing. I recently interviewed for the podcast. I'm going to put it on the chat window. A woman who got a PhD, worked for 5 or 6 years. I don't know exactly her age, but she's obviously, just based on what she's done, she's well into her 30s. And it was a really good podcast, and you might find her story a little bit helpful. And if you look on on the site, we have student interviews, we have the podcast interviews. Some of them are with definitely non-traditional applicants. She's pretty non-traditional. There are other non-traditional applicants, so check it out.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Okay, now Carlotta, I'm gonna unmute you so you can ask your question. If you don't want to, okay, you are still muted, so I will, no, you're unmuted now. Go ahead, go for it. All right, apparently not, so I will do it. Carlotta asks, I don't have research in my experience. How are my chances affected?
Oh, I have good news for you too. So most medical schools do not require research. There's a very small number of schools that prefer to see 2 or more years of research, like UC San Diego or Stanford, but the vast majority of medical schools have no requirement for research. In fact, it is possible to have too much research on your application, right? A medical school will not feel bad rejecting you if it looks like you already have a successful career in research, right? If you've got, like, if half or more of your activities are research, right? They're not going to feel bad rejecting you for that reason. So that's good news, right? There's no requirement for research.
Okay. Then Kelly's asking, how do you access the secondary application questions to prepare them before you submit the primary?
On our website, we have blog tip posts with the secondary questions for lots of the schools. There's several places you can find them. I have a lot of them from previous clients. I have probably most of them for many of the schools. There's lots of different places you can look online, but you just want to verify that they're the correct ones. So the accepted.com tip posts are high quality. You know, we verify every year that they're correct and update them with changes. But yeah, usually it's pretty safe to use the previous year's questions because they don't change very much from year to year.
I'll also share that. If you give me a second, I'll share that.
Yeah, we
that
have
link.
quite a lot there.
And then Rachel asks, how do you explain doing poorly in a course where you feel it was partially due to a professor?
Ooh, that's a tricky one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So how poorly in a course, if I can ask, what was the grade?
Okay, let's see. Rachel, you want to post that? Sorry, there's apparently a motorcycle outside my window.
I can't hear it.
You could or you could not?
I could not.
Oh, good. Okay, she's not responding. Oh, a C in biochem. There we go.
I would say there's no need to explain that. So if it were a
This is
failing
first
grade,
semester teaching.
yeah, if it were a failing grade, possibly, but that's a really tricky situation because you don't want to blame the grade on someone else. It's much better to, it shows more maturity to take responsibility for it and to explain what you could have done better. So I would never recommend blaming a grade on a professor. It would depend on the situation, of course. If there was something really unusual going on, there might be a reason to include something about it. But I would say, there's no need to explain if it was a C.
Okay. Stephen, yes, there will be a recording of this event, and we'll send out a link to it. Okay, anonymous attendee asks, what is the general advice for submitting secondary? Should we submit as soon as possible, or can we wait until August to submit after the MCAT?
Oh gosh, I'm so glad you asked. Please do not wait till after you've taken your MCAT. It's a complicated situation because I know you're probably trying to focus on just studying for the MCAT as we talked about tonight. But if you can get secondary submitted within 1 to 2 weeks of receiving them, you're much more likely to end up on the interview schedule. If you can imagine, there's some desperate administrator trying to fill a schedule and nobody's getting anything back to him or her, and they're panicking. And, when finally they get to add some names to the schedule and they get to fill their schedule, right, they're going to feel a lot better. So the sooner you submit those, the much more likely you are to get an interview.
Right. And actually, we are accepting registrations for our next MED webinar, which is how to create successful secondary applications. And Alicia is also presenting that one. So if you like what you heard today and you want more, I'm going to again post this in the chat window. You can already sign up for that. That's registration is open. Okay, let's see. So thank you for your excellent questions. This is from the shot. Will MD schools understand that COVID prevented you from getting the GPA you targeted for this past spring, as long as you show upward trend this coming fall and spring?
I'm sorry, can you read the question again?
Sure. Hold on one second. Will the medical schools rather, understand that COVID prevented you from getting the GPA you targeted for this past spring, as long as you show upward trend this coming fall and spring?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This pandemic has presented so many challenges that we have yet to even find out for so many people. So absolutely, especially if you write about it that way.
Okay. And
so your voice is getting quiet, Linda. Sorry. It's harder to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you
There
for
we
telling
go.
me. All right.
There we go.
And this is from Vinay. I've heard that some of the more selective schools, Stanford, Ivy League, etc., use GPA to simply screen whether they'll even consider an application. If this is true, which components of our application are most important for further consideration and acceptance?
Yeah, so some schools will let you know if they have a hard cutoff, right, for GPA or MCAT. And you can always contact them to confirm. I know some schools, as I've been doing school selection with students, some schools have conflicting information. Their website will say one thing and the MSAR will say something else different. They may have a hard cutoff on the MSAR and then it won't say anything on their website or vice versa. So in those cases, sometimes it's good to just reach out to the schools and let them know that there's, some confusing information out there so that they can work on that. But also just to confirm if if those cutoffs will remain the same. I really do think things are going to be very different this cycle. I think schools are going to have to be very forgiving. I think, based on the stress our students are under, it's just unprecedented, right? The level of anxiety and stress that everyone's experienced, and how can you expect people to perform their best, especially in their coursework, and especially when everything went online in a matter of days, right? For a lot of students, their campuses within days had to create online courses, and that created a lot of confusion, a lot of difficulty. Some classes were much harder to complete online. So I wouldn't stress out as much. You're welcome to contact the schools and see if those numbers are changing this cycle, or just very carefully select schools that your numbers fit within their range.
Okay, thank you very much. We've gone over, and now I'd like to share a final thought, a story, and a question from me to you. First of all, I want to thank you all for your time, your attention, your questions, your answers, and I want to thank again Alicia for the excellent presentation. I want to share that again, the final thought and story. Your past, especially this low stat or 2, doesn't have to define your future. You can change the stats or bring counter evidence of your abilities. There are also the essays, your activities, secondaries, and interviews. All these are in your control. Make them the best they can be with our help. And now the story. Pat came to Accepted with good grades, but a below average MCAT for MD programs. She was doubting herself and struggling. She started working with Alicia last spring. In December, I received the following email from her. And again, I'm going to quote excerpts. I cannot thank Alicia enough for being such an incredible support system and mentor throughout the long and challenging process of applying to medical school. As of December, I've been accepted to an MD school. I am so thrilled and grateful for the opportunity to work with Alicia. The services offered through Accepted are worth it because the consultants are knowledgeable, supportive, honest, and thorough. I would not have been able to accomplish an MD admission without Alicia's help during the application process, and especially preparing for interviews. I would highly recommend working with Alicia to achieve your medical school goals. And she was later accepted at an additional medical school. Now, Pat had a below average stat, lots of doubts and nerves when facing interviews. She turned to Alicia for guidance and support, and she received a wonderful Christmas present, medical school acceptance. She's on the path to her dream career. Imagine yourself in her shoes, having a trusted guide and mentor as you go through the primary and secondary applications, having someone provide mock interviews and insightful feedback so that you approach your real interview prepared and confident, and then happily sharing news of medical school acceptance. Do as she and so many other applicants just like you have done over the last 26 years. Take the steps she took, which are the ones you see on the screen. Get accepted. And now, my question for you. You've attended the entire presentation, the pitch, and the Q&A. What is causing you to hesitate about engaging with Accepted? Now, some of you are not hesitating, you're planning to do so, but for those of you who are hesitating or are not planning to engage with Accepted, why are you sitting on the fence? In the chat window, please. Alicia, can you see the chat window? I don't think you can. I'm going to try and change it so you can.
No, I don't. I don't see it.
All right, let me see if I can change it so you can.
Okay, now I can.
Okay. Can I ask a live question about this? Sure. Hold on a second. I'll let you go live, Nishat. There you go. You're live.
Hello, I just want to say that I have learned so much in this webinar. I honestly came across this just on a random Google page. And my question was, if I were to be applying in spring of 2021, when can I, or when should I sign up with Alicia to guide me through?
Yeah, I recommend we get started whenever you are ready, but usually end of summer by fall for sure. it's great to have your primary done by winter break and then to start working on secondaries in the new year so that you have those all ready to go by the time the application opens. But I would say, whenever you want to get started, you're absolutely welcome to reach out. For, if you want to have a free consultation, we can talk about, where you're at and what all the services are and what would work better for you specifically. But usually like end of summer, early fall is when students start working with me to apply for the next cycle.
That's the best time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Great.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah,
Michelle.
thank
Great.
you. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Okay, now we're getting a lot of responses here, and that's great. Zach says financial uncertainty. Michelle wants to raise her stats and round out her application before she gets into applying. Okay. I have already committed so much money for prep materials. All right. But that's what we call sunk costs. I have an MBA, so I'm going to speak as an MBA. That's what we call sunk costs. Obviously, you have to have the money to pay for the service. If not, take advantage of our free stuff. But if you want one-on-one advising, that's a future investment that can pay off very, very much like hopefully your prep material investment has paid off. Okay, thinking I need a post-bac program first. By the way, James, we have materials for post-bac applicants also, including, and we also advise post-bac applicants. Hesitation, unsure if accepted has experience with undocumented students.
I do. I actually have helped undocumented students get into medical school in the past.
Okay, great. Is there a resource with information about the more cultural aspects of the various schools that had trouble finding? Okay, that, I don't know if there's anything about that. I think that's more a matter that you have to kind of look into individually. Financial
Yeah, that's a
uncertainty.
tricky one. I've never seen anything. It's really just visiting the school's individual websites. Yeah.
Talking to students. And then
Exactly.
Elizabeth and Yumna says financial uncertainty is my barrier too. That is, that's a reality. We can't remove financial uncertainty, especially now. What we can do though is let you try us out at our smallest price point is a free consultation. You can't beat that price point, and it's for people who are considering our services. You can also start with our smallest investment, and that's $330. That will buy you an hour of advising where you can ask your most important questions. And you can, if you like the advice you get, you can then upgrade from that 1 hour to a multi-hour plan, which has discounts built into it, or a primary application plan, which is a flat rate option that provides you with comprehensive assistance either for your primary application or your primary plus secondary or whatever. You can read about it on the site. I can actually give it to you, give you the link.
I think one thing that's, very unique about our company and our services is you can upgrade from, anything to another package, like from 1 hour to 5 hours or 1 hour to the primary application package. I think that flexibility is really amazing.
And that allows you, again, to try us out first.
Yep, exactly.
The other thing about us is we, I think, have one of the most generous refund policies in the business because we can afford to. People don't usually ask us for refunds. They're usually satisfied.
That rarely ever happens. Yeah, that's true.
Right? So
yeah.
If you read our refund policy and you'll see that if you have not used up, we do not refund time that's been used, but we do offer a refund of unused time or unused portions of the package. Just read the details though. Okay. Let's see. But otherwise, any other questions about our services at this point or any other?
I have to say, I do love it when students ask for a refund after they've gotten accepted. Right? Like, that's awesome. I feel like every year I have somebody who gets accepted after like 8 hours, they bought a 10-hour package.
That's the best reason to ask for a refund. Somebody this would happen if somebody's waiting to hear from medical school and they want to start their reapplication process and not be late in reapplying. So they come to us. That's the best reason to ask for a refund. But is it possible to request advisors specifically? Yes, it is. As long as that person is available, that's whom you'll work with, Zach. So if you want to work with Alicia, you can request her this evening, and right now she is available.
Yes, I am.
So if you want to work with somebody else, and they're available, Alicia, I'm coming. Okay, great. Wonderful, Alicia.
Aw.
Okay, full package. Great. Go for it.
Yay, thank you. That's awesome. I'll look forward
Okay.
to it.
Same here. Yeah. All right. So with that, I just want to thank you very, very much for your attention, your participation, your questions, your answers, and wish you all the best on your medical school application. Have a very, very good evening. Thank you again, Alicia. Thank you all for coming. And I should share with you that a lot of thank yous are coming to you. You're very, very welcome. You've been a great audience.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating. And thank you, Linda, for hosting.
My pleasure.